David met his Goliath. In life, we have challenges. More often than not, those challenges provide us the motivation to set our life's goals. Most of us, if not all, set out in life determined to slay our dragons. Young David had his dragon, the giant fighting champion of the Philistines named Goliath. With a sling and a shepherd's staff, young David slew Goliath. His unlikely victory became the most popular underdog victory in the history of one-on-one combat, which catapulted him to fame and ultimately to the throne of Israel. It was a youthful victory, but not without the adults who played father to him. Today, we will consider those adults. But first, the story. After Samuel anointed David to be Israel's next king, the book of 1 Samuel tells us that the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. His attendants advised him to employ one who can play the lyre to help him from his misery. As it happened, one of his attendants knew just one such man, the fine-looking and brave warrior, son of Jesse. And that was how David came into the employ of King Saul. The story says Saul liked him right away. He became one of Saul's armor-bearer, and whenever the tormenting spirit came on Saul, David would take up his lyre and play. Relief would come to Saul, and he would feel better, and the evil spirit would leave him. Then a war broke out between the Israelites and its perennial enemy nation, the Philistines. Their two armies took their positions on opposite mountains, with a valley in between them, the place where the pitched battle is supposed to be waged. The Philistines had a champion fighter about 9 feet 9 inches tall. His armor alone weighed 125 pounds. He had bronze leggings and bronze javelin slung in his back, and he also had a spear which tip alone weighed about 15 pounds. The story says for 40 days, which really meant for a long period of time, this Philistine champion would come out and taunt the ranks of Israel. He would challenge the Israelite army to a one-on-one winner-take-all combat, the loser having to submit as slave to the winner. Saul and the Israelites, the story says, were terrified by Goliath. Now Jesse, remember him from last week's meditation, Jesse of Bethlehem had 8 sons. 3 of his oldest sons, just as Samuel earlier warned the nation, had followed Saul to war, while his youngest, David, went back and forth from Saul's palace to tending his sheep in the field. One day, as the battle was yet on its war stage, Jesse sent David to take some supply to his brothers in the war front and to bring back words on how his brothers were faring. David did as he was told, and just as he was talking with his brothers, Goliath stepped out of his line and shouted his usual challenge. Young David heard it. The story goes on to say that while the army of Israel cowered and fled at the sight of Goliath, David did not. He took offense of the fact that the Philistine would defy the army of the living God. David also heard that the king will give a hefty reward to the man who can kill the giant, on top of giving his daughter in marriage to such a man, and his family being given tax-exempt status. One of those bounties should be enough for any soldier to step to the plate and take on Goliath. But David's interest was not so much on the bounty as much as it was on defending the honor of the living God. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God, said David. David's older brother did not appreciate the fact that his younger brother was talking. His brothers went on to the extent of questioning his motive for coming out. Remember, he was sent by his father to bring them some food supply. They even accused him of being conceited and one with a wicked heart. They thought David was there out of curiosity, just wanting to watch the battle unfold, unmindful of David's raw courage. But news of David's unusual courage and his wish to face Goliath reached King Saul. The king sent for him. "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him," said David. Saul was not convinced. "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." David then related to the king how he had done battle with a lion and a bear to protect his father's flock. He told the king that his God who rescued him from the lion and the bear will be the same God who will rescue him from the hand of the Philistine. With those words, Saul gave young David his blessing. "Go, and the Lord be with you." He even tried to fit David with his own sword and armor, but David had no use for them. He took them off. He took his staff instead, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in a pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with a sling in hand, faced the Philistine. The taunting and the trash-talking that ensued between David and Goliath is informative. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." But young David was undaunted. He had faith in God and confidence in his own skills. With his skill in his mind, Goliath will be just another kill like his lion and his bear. He returned Goliath's trash talk. "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I'll give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and He will give all of you into our hands." In considering this exchange of trash talks, we need to keep in mind that in those days, fighters go to war believing that their gods were with them, and that their gods were involved and heavily invested in the fight. A win for one camp is a win for its God. A victory for Goliath is a win for the Philistines' God. A win for young David will add fame to Yahweh. The whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. The one-on-one mismatch of a combat that ensued was described this way. As the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from the sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. Like David, our life's battle come in increments. David's fight did not begin with the national championship against Goliath. He had earlier lesser-known fights against bears and lions. But it is after we win those small curtain raisers of a fight that the big fight comes, Such is true in the sport of boxing, such is true in the business called life. In the Christian life, I believe there are two major goals. First, we prove ourselves to be Christians, and then we prove our God is real and alive. In both cases, God is our helper. But in the latter, as in the game of chess, we are but pawns and pieces in God's hand. In the words of David, the battle is the Lord's. To prove that God is real and alive, sometimes all we have to do is to be on the board. And on the board, or in the arena of life, we could be the horse or the knight in the shining armor. Finally, in life, like David, courage of conviction counts. Conviction does not only define a person, it provides direction. It serves as the moral compass to stay the course when in turbulent or uncharted waters. It also serves as the protective shield against the waves of the ambivalent public opinion. David's own brothers thought he was acting out of conceit for being at the battlefront. Eliab, his older brother, even accused him of having a wicked heart for leaving his father's flock just to be able to watch the fight. But David did not allow his brother's uninformed, be it protective opinion to sway him. His courage of conviction was stronger than his brother's fear for his life. By the same token, King Saul thought very little and therefore underestimated his abilities and skills. Saul replied, "You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth," referring to Goliath. Courage of conviction is the best shield against the fear of what other people may say, be it a brother or a king. A lot of people fear what others might say more than what God might say and think of them. What has faith, skill, and courage of conviction got to do with the celebration of Father's Day? Children are commanded to honor their parents. It is the commandment that carries with it the promise of long life. But parents are also told to train the children in the way that they should go so that in the future, when they are grown up, they do not depart from it. Training children in the way that they should go has been interpreted to mean training in the faith, going to church and Sunday school, and learning the ethics of the Christian life. Life caring is sharing. And those are equally important. But biblical scholars also tell us that there is an actual practical meaning to the training of children in the way they should go. They explain that all children come equipped with nature's gifts. Parents therefore should train their children according to those gifts. A lefty should be allowed to be a lefty. A singer should not be discouraged from singing. Children gifted with people skills should be encouraged to pursue careers that involve relating with people. The wisdom of old teaches parents to train their children according to the gifts they are born with, so that when they grow up, they will not depart from it. Many times, however, we parents make the mistake of forcing our children to pursue our own frustrated or unfulfilled ambitions. At other times, parents discourage their children from pursuing certain careers for economic reason. There is no money in philosophy or acting. Robin Williams heard about it. David's home-honed skills were with his staff and his sling. Saul tried to fit him with his, but David had no use for them. A faith and a sling with courage of conviction were his lethal weapons. David's older brother played adults. They were protective of him, tried to shield him from the ugliness and the danger of battle. So did King Saul. But it was his father Jesse who did not play favorite, who exposed David to the harsh realities of life. He tended the sheep, letting him develop his muscles and his skills with the sling, sending him to the battlefront to bring supplies and check on his older sons. It was Jesse who was his biological father and a real father to him. As parents, fathers especially, we need to develop in our children the faith that grows into courage of conviction. We also need to train them according to the way that they should go, according to the gifts nature has already bestowed on them, so that as they face and fight their life's battle, they will be equipped and hopefully they will come out victorious in God's name. Amen and amen.